very nice introduction, and also I'm very grateful for being here and having spent this day for this fantastic conference. And I'm grateful to Goethe Institute and for the organizer Thomas and Artbjörg for having put together such a fantastic thing. Yes, I will be talking about a different way of thinking. Although I'm not from Africa, I'm telling a story because it's kind of my own story in academic philosophy. And I've been teaching philosophy for over 30 years. And as you may know, this is, the Rodin's thinker here. And I have here a picture of myself. This is Rodin's thinker, and me on the right side with a picture an artist friend of mine sent me. I was telling her how I felt in philosophy, like the thinker had become a skeleton with a parrot's head, so that academics have become kind of disembodied and just repeating concepts and theories, sort of disconnected. So what I'm going to talk about today is what kind of thinking is needed in terms of what is happening with the environment, in terms of politics, and personally and interpersonally. Let's begin with the big politics of climate change. Here's a picture from, I think it was the Glasgow last summit, where they were discussing solutions, and it's all about green economy within the capitalist system. And it's very much about buying and selling of carbon emissions. So we know it is not enough. I mean, it's not enough it's great if we can reduce carbon emissions, but it's not enough if we, are to have the change which is needed. So we are now living in the age of the Anthropocene, which means that man has become a geological force. We have changed the climate, we've changed the surface of the earth. So what is climate change? I have here a quote from David Abram. What is climate change if not a consequence of failing to respect or even notice the elemental medium in which we are immersed? So what is needed now is kind of new sensibilities, a new way of sensing what is happening. It's not enough just to know. We have all the facts, but we seem unable to change anything, both on a collective level and individually. So I think this goes very much, boils down to how we have trained thinking, and I'm talking here in Western thinking. We've very much thought of thinking in terms of brains. How we construct the world. It comes from Descartes, via Kant, and into modern science. And it's been extremely effective. We can have cell phones, and we've had great mathematics to do all we need here, but it comes at a cost. So it has contributed to disconnecting us from our lived experience. We've kind of neglected that part of our cognition because we are embodied and embedded beings. And we know now, research in cognitive sciences shows us that the body is totally part of our thinking process. So what I have started to study now in recent years is what I frame as the turn to embodiment and enactivism. So thinking is not just it's not just reflecting experience, but to think that thinking itself as a reflection is a form of experience. In our usual training and practice as Western scientists and philosophers, we proceed differently. We ask, what is the mind? What is the body? And proceed to reflect theoretically and to investigate scientifically. In the course of these investigations, we forget who is asking this question and how it's asked. And by not including ourselves in this reflection, it remains only a partial one, and our question becomes disembodied. And I'm taking this from a book from Varela and Thompson and Ross, The Embodied Mind, which came out in 1993 and sort of instantiated the embodied turn. So we are now shifting from disembodied to an embodied mind. So we're moving into an awareness of what it is like to experience and to think and to know, what it is to be a human with the world. We're just getting a bigger picture of it. So we are now in a situation where we can go from disconnection to more connection, a disconnection from ourselves, from others, from human and non-human beings, because the environment and oneself are connected, are one. We just see it when we drink water. You know, water goes into our bodies, circulates there, and it leaves our bodies. The same goes for food. The same goes for our breathing. We take the world in, the atmosphere in, and it leaves our bodies. So everything is interrelated, interdependent, and everything is a process. So when I talk about reconnecting, and I'm talking here from the standpoint of philosophy and sciences in general, it means reconnecting consciously and explicitly with what we can call the felt sense or felt meaning. We have always been connected with it, but we've sort of forgot it. And we have therefore neglected this part of what it means to think. This means that we have become disconnected from what we call in phenomenology and pragmatist philosophies as lived experience. And this is kind of the sensitive and fluid matter where the distinction between mind and body dissolves. Because our ideas are made beneath the words. The poets here in the audience know this, the dancers know this, because they think with their movements. So there are many ways of thinking, and we can articulate these thoughts with words also. So our ideas are rhythms that have their source in the movement of the world. Life thinks through us. But we have cut ourselves off from the felt dimension of thinking. We are most of the time cut off from this dimension, the living heart of our experience. Maybe 20 years from now, you will not remember, if you recall this day, you will not remember what you heard, but you may recall the vibe of this or the feel of this day. And when you go into that vibe, you may recall other minor details because the body stores everything we know. So we have lost contact with the flesh of the world, the source of life and meaning. We are cut off from its subtle rhythms. We are drained of our vital energy. So the new challenge of critical thinking, and I am a teacher of critical thinking, that's what we do in philosophy, and critical thinking can obviously also be creative thinking, but it's, you know, what we do. It's becoming more aware of how we think. If I had time, I would like to stop now for a moment and just have a silence for a minute and have us just observe our minds, what happens in our thinking while we just sit. We rarely do that. And I'm supposed to teach thinking, and I just learned this, you know, in the later years of my career. So, this kind of thinking has, of course, a basis in cognitive sciences, but it's also something that meditative and contemplative practices in Western and Eastern traditions have always known. Now, so we have been trained in disconnecting, but we can learn to reconnect. And it takes some effort because perceptual and thinking patterns become sedimented over time as embodied habits. But we can reconnect by, going into more, awareness of what we're doing, where I am, how I sense being here, and what exactly are we experiencing when we get close to a tree, a river, when we cross a forest, meet an insect or a bird. What we feel when we are in contact with nature or when we are deprived of it has been little studied in the absence of a suitable method and remains ignored. That is luckily changing, and I can just point to a number of authors and books that have come out in the last decades. For example, by Eugene Gendlin, process model, the embodied mind that I quoted before, Varela, Thompson, Roche, and another book by Gendlin, Experiencing and the Creation of Meaning. So what these authors are doing are developing methods of embodied thinking, of a kind of thinking from within. When I started out, I showed this picture of the parrot thinker, who is just like, a thinking head, repeating something and not really thinking for themselves. And we sometimes now talk about those kind of thinkers and talkers. They're just doing abouting, talking about. We would like thinking, the way we do it, be more coming from within. So we talk about withinning. So this an activist approach was initiated by Varela. And the experiential approach, which is a similar one, was initiated by Eugene Gendlin, who was a philosopher also working within psychology. Wittgenstein, a philosopher, he said we are sometimes trapped in habits of thinking. And he talked about that we're like trapped like a fly in a bottle, and we need to show the fly a way out of the bottle. And these methodologies that we are now developing and exploring are trying to go there. Because we don't really have an immediate access to experience, and we have to learn it. And we can do it through micro gestures. So what we are doing is learning to become aware of experience and learn to trigger acts that allow us to become aware of experience. And we do that with methodologies of interviewing and being interviewed. So critical thinking is not only about what arguments we are thinking about, but also about how we think. So we give attention to the experience of thinking. And it's very much a matter of how we listen to ourselves and how we listen to others in thinking. And now when I teach introductory courses to philosophy, the first thing I teach my students is to listen. And I have them do listening exercises. And I teach them that when they're listening to others, they really begin to listen to themselves. How am I listening? So to listen to meaning in a dialogue, how I experience the other in me. So this approach means that we should create conditions for a philosophical dialogue where this experience is possible. Now, so these are the conditions for critical thinking, creating a space to listen to ourselves and others. So it's about listening and experience, becoming aware of lived experience as inner listening, to access experience, that is, to feel our own sources for our ideas. It can be through stories or experiences that we have had, to use ourselves as a source of knowledge. We can also do it through a methodology of felt sensing, to always go into our bodies and really sense what we are thinking, to become touched in thinking, connecting with the felt meaning, oneself and others, when listening to another. But how do we normally listen? let's think of, examples of bad listening. Often we are very impatient because we're waiting to get our point across. So we're not really listening to the other. Everybody knows that. We can also be very egocentric in our listening because we only reply to the other by referring to what is said by going, oh, that's the same with me. Or we can be very judging because we are categorizing what is said according to our own ideas and preconceptions. Or we offer too quickly answers and solutions. So this is all a sign of bad inner listening. Often it's also kind of the voice of the inner critic who overpowers our listening. Oh, it's not really important what you're thinking, all these old voices that are operative in our heads and we have to learn to put aside. So we really have to learn and train how to listen to ourselves listening. So how do we go from good to something like extreme listening? And I'm going a little bit into politics here. And because we're happy when we experience that someone listens attentively to what we are saying. It's one of the things that makes us the most happy when we're listened to. We are content when we hear ourselves, when we connect with ourselves. But there can be extreme cases where it's very difficult to listen to someone you totally disagree with. And I was very inspired by two documentaries that I saw by a Pakistani-born BBC documentary filmmaker, Dia Khan, who has an experience of racism as an immigrant child in the UK. And she decided to do documentaries of ISIS fighters and neo-Nazis in the US. And these documentaries are on the internet to see there. And what she did, she talked to these people who she is in complete disagreement with and who totally abhor her as a feminist, a leftist, an immigrant in the UK, etc. So what happened is that when you see these documentaries, that she allows these people to speak. And some of them said to her, wow, I've never been listened to. I feel so much anger in myself because nobody has ever listened to me. And then something happens. The one who's listened to changes as well as the one who listens. So this is what we call a transformative dialogue. It's a very extreme case, and she talks about it as extreme listening. And this is indeed a very, kind of an enlarging glass what is happening in our world of polarized opinions. Because through algorithms and social media, we are very much posed in opposition to one another. We are in echo chambers where there's an opposite echo chamber. So this is something that is very good for the powers that be, because when we fight about little issues, the powers that be can in peace rule the world and do what they want. So this is indeed a very powerful tool to undermine polarization. I have here a quote from a children's book, which is actually also an adult's book, Momo, a German book about Momo's talent for listening. I don't think I will read it, but it's a lovely way of, just a lovely description of what it means to be listened to and to listen attentively. I myself, I don't think I would have become a philosopher if I hadn't lived next to a moose ground. When I was 10 years old, my parents divorced and my family was dissolving. And I used to go to this moose and lie there, and it would give me so much peace and so much consolation lying in the moose. If you have a chance, the visitors here, go lie in moose. And what happened to me was I felt carried by the ground. And at the same time, I saw the clouds moving. And it got all kinds of ideas going in me. Am I making the clouds move, or is the is the sky making the earth move? So I was having all these ideas. And it was kind of my way of also, I ended up teaching environmental philosophy, philosophy of nature and the body, and I think it's because of the moose, among other things, also my mother. But I've been teaching this now for recent years, and one of my students, she is a teacher, a crafts teacher, and she has, this is just an example, and she teaches philosophy and carving. So she has the most difficult students in her school, people who have dropped out of school, and they don't want to go to school, they only sit at home. And this has become kind of a phenomena among young people, home sitters, they just are inactive. So what they come to her, and they don't want to talk. And so she takes them outside and they start carving. And it's something with the hand and this movement. And sometimes after 2 or 3 weeks, they start talking. And after 4 weeks, they are philosophizing because she's a philosophy teacher. So it's a way of kind of getting them out. They connect with the environment, they connect with themselves through the hand also. So I think it's a kind of a nice example of how you can also incorporate it more into the school system. So just to end with, we have established now a training program, an international training program. It's been running now, coming in its 3rd year, and it's financed by the European Union. And we are teaching these methods to scholars, also to use them in research, in science, how we can become better scientists. Use our embodied dimensions of thinking more explicitly and consciously, because we have it. It's kind of a natural way of thinking. So I think I'll end it with that. So thank you.